A theory that I chose to analyze is the social disorganization theory. This states that inner city areas are more disorganized and they're lacking in the social resources needed to meet the needs of its residents. So, therefore, crime occurs more often. Inner city areas tend to be populated by a high percentage of people of color. Um, and this lack of social support and economic support for those of color has dated back a ways historically. And there's also been a lot of public policies that have been designed to target those of color to disallow them from having equal opportunities in society. And so this has led minorities into poverty. And then poverty then influences crime because of the limited capacity for the community to meet the needs of the impoverished areas. Um, and this can be explained by the broken windows theory as well, which states that crime is more likely to occur in areas that are disorganized and unkempt. Um, and so these are all indicative of systemic racism occurring in our society today. So really, it's a vicious cycle. Society treats minorities with a lack of social and economic resources. Therefore, minorities become poor, and their poverty limits them from keeping their communities organized and kept. Therefore, crime occurs. And once crime occurs, then minorities are labeled as criminals, and the cycle begins again. Because once they're labeled as criminals, then society doesn't want to give them the resources to become successful. So oftentimes, this disorganization can lead to crime and drive crime because people have to resort to crime to attain things that they can't due to the lack of social resources and the disorganization. So, for instance, like many people in the inner city rely on crime to stay afloat because there aren't enough economic resources available around them. Uh, so, a lot of criminals in the inner city rely on their crime in order to just get by. So that's why a lot of when people get mugged, like muggings are a lot. People use that money to stay afloat because they have no other way to do that. Social disorganization can also drive gang violence because oftentimes the resources, our social resources, to keep people safe in an inner city aren't there. So people take it into their own hands. And that's the reason why a lot of people join gangs is to feel safer because they have a group surrounding them at least, and they're not alone. Um, so naturally, this occurs. Because of the social disorganization, gangs are formed to facilitate some kind of organization. And then the crimes that gangs commit relate back to the broken windows theory and also the lack of social resources. And so they must commit them in order to make it financially, and they also um, the communities that they operate in are poverty stricken. So they are disorganized and unkempt, and this, based on the broken windows theory, um, leads to more crime happening. So really, the only way that we can stop this vicious cycle is by reorganizing our social policies, by ending systemic racism, by providing equal opportunities to those of color. And once this begins, then it'll cut the cycle off at the um, where society treats minorities with a lack of social and economic resources. And so if we don't treat them that way, then over time it will correct the system, and then it won't be minorities won't be at a disadvantage uh, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to being economically okay. Um, so if we can eliminate this systemic racism, then uh, that will lead to social disorganization theory will still exist. However, it will not explain simply minority communities. It will just explain poverty stricken communities.